We're here to have a bond set, but this court does not have the authority or the jurisdiction to set a bond for a sentence of a crime that could get you life in prison. So today's bond is being denied.
Two young parents, one courtroom, one word that changed everything. Denied. Sunday, July 5th, Aiken County, South Carolina. A mother stepped before a magistrate in the morning. The father took the same spot that afternoon. Same accusation, same answer. No bond for either one, and the charge waiting for them both carries 20 years to life.
You've been charged with homicide by child abuse, which carries a prison sentence, if convicted, of 20 years to life. You understand that?
But rewind just a few days, because none of this makes sense without what came before it.
Also going into more details about exactly when the missing child's case has been reported. According to the sheriff, it happened around 8:43 p.m. on Tuesday. That's when 911 received the call about the missing girl, again, 4-year-old Javeayah.
Hundreds of searchers, helicopters overhead, dogs working the tree line. More than 3,000 acres combed inch by inch, in heat pushing toward 100 degrees. All of it for one little girl in Minnie Mouse pajamas. Everyone was praying to find her alive.
I'm praying that they find that baby safe. I'm praying that they find her safe, and I'm praying that her mom can have peace, or her parents can have peace.
They never had a chance, because according to investigators, that massive 4-day search was hunting for a child who had already been gone for weeks. The story her own parents told about the night she vanished? Authorities now say almost none of it was true, and the person who called 911 to report her missing is now sitting in a jail cell, charged in her death. So how does a 4-year-old disappear a month before anyone reports it, inside her own home, with family right there? Why did the father assume police were at his house for a completely different reason? What was born into this family the very next day, while strangers searched the woods for a little girl who was already gone?
Yeah, it's sad. It shouldn't happen.
And just a 4-year-old, you know, it's just sad that a 4-year-old is just taken missing, and just, you know, we were looking for her to come up, found some kind of a way, but unfortunately, it was just a bad circumstance.
And the question underneath all of it, the one that still, right now, has no answer. Where is Javeayah? Her body has not been found, and where investigators are looking now will make the hair on your neck stand up. Here's the thing, Javeayah can't tell her own story anymore. That's on us now. So if you'll do one small thing for a little girl who chased chickens in her backyard, subscribe to this channel before we go further. It costs you nothing. It keeps her story and cases like hers from being forgotten. Then stay with me, because we need to go back to the very beginning.
The people at home, what you can do is share that picture that you see on your screen. There's another picture of her online. Share that picture. Put her name out there. Keep her face out there. We want everyone to know that this little girl is missing, and we are working to find her. And we are working to, we're continuing to follow that search to find her. So again, you can submit any tips that you have to that tip line. That number is on your screen or on our website, wherever you can find it.
Her name was Javeayah Harris. She was 4 years old. She stood 3 feet, 6 inches tall, and weighed around 40 pounds. On the night she was reported missing, the description that went out to the public painted a picture almost too small for the size of the search that followed. Minnie Mouse pajamas, pink beads woven into her braided hair, little Crocs on her feet. The people who knew her called her smart, talkative, friendly. Investigators would later have to correct some early rumors, making it clear she was not nonverbal and not autistic, despite what a few reports had claimed. She was, by every account from those around her, an ordinary, bright little kid. One detail from the family stuck with a lot of people who followed the case. She loved Minnie Mouse, and she liked to chase chickens. Remember that. The chickens matter. It was Tuesday, June 30th, 2026. Shortly after 8:45 that evening, Javeayah's mother, 22-year-old Michelle Herring, called 911. Her daughter, she said, had vanished. The mother told authorities she had last seen the 4-year-old roughly 45 minutes earlier, playing outside near the family's chicken coop. The family searched the property. They couldn't find her, so they called for help. The father, 23-year-old Javeayah Harris, told his own version of that night. He said he hadn't even been home. He said he'd left for about 90 minutes, a stop at a laundromat, a stop at a convenience store, and returned around 9 to find deputies already swarming his street. He said his first thought wasn't even about his daughter. He assumed the police were there because his girlfriend had gone into labor. She was, after all, pregnant and due at any moment. Then he learned the truth. Javeayah was missing, and within hours, one of the largest missing child searches in recent South Carolina history was underway. It started that same Tuesday night. Deputies stopped cars, they knocked on doors, they pushed into the dark woods around the home near Hillsborough Street and Ridgecrest Road. By the next morning, it had exploded into something enormous. More than 200 personnel, helicopters cutting across the sky, drones, K-9 teams working scent lines, roadblocks, neighborhood after neighborhood, canvassed door to door. Before it was over, crews would cover more than 3,000 acres of terrain. And this wasn't just the local sheriff's office. The FBI came in. So did the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, the state's Department of Natural Resources, the Forestry Commission, neighboring departments and volunteer fire crews from across the region. A local church, Bethel Baptist, opened its doors and became the command post, feeding searchers, giving them shade and water in brutal summer heat. The community showed up too, tied up their dogs so search teams could move, combed their own backyards and sheds. Neighbors told reporters they'd seen the family around. Regular faces at the corner store, kids in tow, nothing that seemed off. The urgency was real. The fear was real. Temperatures were climbing toward 100 degrees, and every hour that passed made the thought of a 4-year-old alone out there more unbearable. But even in those first frantic days, small, strange notes crept in. For one, there was no Amber Alert. Authorities explained the case simply didn't meet the criteria for one, though the state said it stood ready to issue an alert the moment the situation changed. Then, on Thursday, a deputy told the public the case was being treated as an abduction. The sheriff's office quickly walked it back, saying the deputy had misspoken. It was a small correction, but it was the first hint that behind the scenes, the story wasn't as simple as a child who wandered off. Through those days, the father spoke to the cameras. Javeayah Harris told a local station that not knowing where his daughter was killing him. He described people who had, in his words, been snooping around the house lately, planting the idea out loud that maybe someone had taken her. He insisted Javeayah wasn't the type to run away. He pushed back on the reports calling her autistic. He talked about her the way a grieving parent would, respectful, sweet, always saying yes ma'am and no sir. But investigators quietly were reaching a very different conclusion. They said they had found no evidence of an abduction. None. And the more they worked the case, the more the family's account started to come apart. Then came Friday, and the first crack the public could actually see. The sheriff's office announced the search would become, in their words, less visible. Organized efforts would scale back. To anyone watching closely, it was a signal. Something had shifted. The machine that had been roaring for 4 days was changing direction. Nobody outside the investigation yet knew why. Saturday, July 4th, Independence Day. While much of the country was firing up grills and setting off fireworks, Aiken County Sheriff Marty Sawyer stepped up to a microphone to deliver news he clearly did not want to say. He called it the hardest announcement of his 36 years in law enforcement. Investigators, he said, now believed 4-year-old Javeayah Harris was dead. And then he said the thing that turned this case inside out. She hadn't died that Tuesday. She hadn't wandered off into the woods and succumbed to the heat. According to the sheriff, the evidence supported something far darker. Javeayah had been dead for at least a month. Sit with that. A month. Which meant that on the night of the 911 call, the night that launched helicopters and drones and hundreds of searchers into the dark, it was, in the sheriff's own words, already far too late to save her. The search for a living child had, in reality, never been possible. The story the parents told about a girl playing by the chicken coop gone for 45 minutes? Authorities now treat that entire account as false. And so, on that same day, deputies made 2 arrests. The father, Javeayah Harris, was charged with homicide by child abuse. The mother, Aiken County, was charged with homicide by child abuse and with filing a false police report. The sheriff added that additional charges against both of them could still be coming. But even as the handcuffs went on, the case was missing its most important piece. Javeayah's body had not been found. The sheriff revealed that investigators had moved their search to an area of interest, and, pointedly, one outside of Aiken County. He refused to say exactly where. Reporting indicated that the state law enforcement division had deployed a helicopter to the Great Falls area, with crews working through wooded terrain, hunting for the little girl's remains. Authorities would not say what led them to that specific place. They would not say whether they believed Javeayah's body had been moved there, or how far it might have traveled from the home where she once chased chickens in the yard. The search that began as a rescue had quietly, heartbreakingly become a recovery. And here is the detail that so many people simply cannot get past. Remember the father's assumption on the night of the 911 call that police were at his home because his girlfriend was in labor? He wasn't entirely wrong about the timing. Aiken County gave birth to a baby the very next day, Wednesday, July 1st, one day after she reported her 4-year-old daughter missing. While hundreds of strangers were out in the heat, searching the woods for a child who investigators now believe had already been dead for weeks, a new baby was being born into that same family. The sheriff's office confirmed the newborn has since been placed with relatives. A missing child, a false report, and a new life arriving in the middle of it all. The whole thing is almost impossible to hold in your mind at once. And it's part of why this case has gripped so many people who've never set foot in South Carolina. Which brings us back to that quiet courtroom on Sunday, July 5th. The parents appeared, one at a time, before Magistrate Judge Ronald Thornton. Herring went first in the morning. On the false police report charge, the judge denied her bond outright. When the court asked about her finances, she said she worked at a company called Transcom, paid around $1,300 every 2 weeks. That income, the judge ruled, was actually too high to qualify her for a court-appointed attorney. She had no lawyer standing beside her. The father appeared that afternoon. He too was denied bond. Asked about his own finances, he said he worked for a company, but couldn't say how much he made in a given week. He was also found ineligible for a court-appointed attorney. But here's the key legal wrinkle. A magistrate judge doesn't have the authority to set bond on a homicide charge. That decision has to move up to a circuit court judge, who must hear the matter within 30 days. So for now, both parents remain locked inside the Aiken County Detention Center. Their next court date is set for mid-September, and the stakes could not be higher. If convicted of homicide by child abuse, Each of them faces a sentence ranging from 20 years all the way to life in prison. So this is where the case stands, and this is where it gets frustrating. Because for all the arrests, all the charges, the biggest questions are still wide open, not because they're being hidden from you, but because right now, investigators themselves haven't answered them publicly. Question 1. Where is Javeayah? Days after the announcement, her body still has not been recovered. Why is the search unfolding miles away, outside the county where she lived? Was she moved? And if so, by whom? Question 2. How did she die? And what exactly told investigators she had been gone for a month? Authorities have not released a cause of death. They have not laid out the evidence behind that timeline. That silence is deliberate, but it leaves a hole in the story the size of a canyon. Question 3. What role did each parent play? The charges are identical for the homicide count, but authorities have not said whether they believe both were involved in her death, or whether one caused it and the other helped hide it. 2 people, 1 little girl, and a version of events prosecutors say was a lie. Question 4 is the one that haunts people the most. If Javeayah had already been gone for weeks, why call 911 at all? Why invite hundreds of searchers and the FBI and the entire weight of the state onto your own doorstep? What happened on June 30th that made that phone call happen on that exact night? The night before a new baby arrived. There's more swirling online too. Screenshots said to come from a relative, an uncle, have been circulating on social media. They appear to show messages with the mother from back in May, weeks before the report, in which people claim she never brought her daughter up on her own and dodged the question when asked about her directly. Those messages have not been verified by authorities. Treat them as exactly that, unconfirmed. But they are part of why this case has taken on a life of its own. For now, the answers may not arrive until forensic evidence is gathered, until court documents are unsealed, until prosecutors finally stand up in that circuit courtroom and lay out what they say really happened inside that home. On Sunday evening, the community that spent 4 days searching for Javeayah gathered again, this time at a spot in Aiken, candles in hand. They came to remember a 4-year-old who loved Minnie Mouse, and they came to pray for something the courts have only just begun to pursue: justice. A little girl is still out there, somewhere, waiting to be brought home. And a case that began with a frantic call about a child by a chicken coop has become something almost no one in that community could have imagined. We'll be following every development as it unfolds. If you want to stay with this story as the answers finally come, subscribe to this channel so the next update reaches you the moment it drops. A final note before we go. Javeayah Harris and Michelle Herring have been charged. They have not been convicted, and under the law, they are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in a court of law. Investigators have not released a cause of death, and some of the details circulating online, including those text messages, have not been confirmed by authorities. This video reflects what is publicly known as of early July 2026, and we will update it as the facts develop. Rest easy, little one. May they bring you home